many of you listening to the show have thought about writing your memoirs, putting it together, telling the stories, the adventures, the ups and downs, what, your life has been like, and leaving that for your family, and then even beyond your family. So I'm going to introduce you to a woman who's in our virtual green room right now in this version of Author's Corner, named Ruth Claxton, and she's written that. She's done that. The Early Years, a Memoir. So Ruth, first of all, congratulations on actually doing more than talking and putting it down so you could preserve that for the family and for others to see what an interesting, rich life that you certainly have led. And thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Kate, for inviting me.
So tell me about that process of putting that together. You have bits and pieces and stories. Did you have journals? Did you have things written down? How did you pull from your life?
I did, but Kate, first I want to say that the book is written under my pen name, and that's Rachel G. Carrington.
Yep. Okay, so that's good. So when people look it up, remember that, look up Rachel Carrington. And
Rachel G. You must put the middle initial in there. There is another author by the same name.
You have the same problem as me. You have the popular names. So there's a lot of Kate Delaney's. So I understand totally. So we'll remind people of that again. But so how did you do that? How did you collect those stories?
Well, I kept journals for even starting with my high school years. I kept journals of day-to-day activities. But in 1989, a major flood in Ohio just wiped my journals out. They were stored in my basement. My house was flooded, and I had to throw them away. I couldn't even get the pages apart to read them once they dried. So anyway, I had to work from memory, but I was really surprised at how just one memory would key another one so fast that I kept two screens on my computer going, one for notes and one for the manuscript as I was writing it. So, it was a pleasure to bring all that memory back. It's something that I needed to do years before I did it.
I love that you said that it was a pleasure to do that. Give us one of your memories, one of your fondest memories.
Well, I guess my fondest memory was meeting the man who became my husband, and I met him as he returned from World War II. He was in the Navy. I met him, and he'd come home to a family, a marriage that didn't work, that had fallen apart while he was away. And I met him, and during that time, a divorced man was a no-no as far as my parents and most older people felt. But somehow I knew from the very beginning that he was the man for me, and 62 years of marriage proved it.
Yeah, wow, 62 years of marriage. And when you started off, and you talked to me off the air, and you said, we start off poor. The Great Depression, and what was that like? A lot of struggles. But in that struggles,
right,
developed that relationship, right?
Yes. But
because you have to
before that. My book starts a little earlier than that. It starts when I'm in high school, and I did so want to be a teacher. But the fact that I was born in the Depression years, there was poverty rampant. We didn't know anyone who had any money, and it was just hard to make a living. And I knew it was going to be a struggle for me to ever go to college. But a major scholarship was offered to me, and it would have paid for everything. But when I met my husband-to-be, it changed my life completely. I did not want to leave the area. I gave up my scholarship to go back to another student, and that's where my story with my husband started.
Wow. So what does your family say about your book?
About my book. I thought you meant about my choice. About my book, I wrote the books especially for my family because we had a great life, a life that would be interesting, I thought, to them, and I wanted them to know where they came from and the goals we had set in life and how we'd come about them. And so that's why I wrote my book. But when I submitted it to be published, I actually didn't submit it to be published. I submitted it because I wanted it in book form to give to my family. Well, my person I talked to at the publisher said, why don't you let us decide once we read the book? And so that's where it started. I did get a contract for publishing it, and here it is now. And I'm glad that I did that because it seems to have been, from the reviews that I have, it seems to have been quite an inspiration to a lot of young people who didn't know what they were going to do, or didn't have any goals in life. And that's one thing my husband and I both always have taught our kids, to set their goals and then go for them. And that's what this book seems to be the impact that the book has made.
Yeah, so the message to young people is also, too, right, that you have to struggle to get what you want to get those goals.
Right, you have to work for it, and you need to know that what you're looking for is something that God would want for you to have in your life. But when all these fall together, hard work can go a long way toward reaching your goals. You don't want to set them too high. You've got to be realistic, but yet high enough that you'd have to work to get there. And that's what we did. And we came from nothing in the 1930s and the 40s and even in the 50s. But steadily we began to grow. And I credit my husband along. He was quite a leader. I called him a dreamer. He would dream about things he wanted to do, but they became a reality. He worked to make them a reality. So we had just a very interesting life.
And you and I talked about that interesting life, and I want to remind everyone, Ruth's book is called The Early Years, a Memoir. Rachel G. Carrington is the name that she writes under, so it's very easy to find her on Amazon. There's a beautiful cover on the front, and she talks about, the journeys. What's the coolest place that you and your husband ever traveled to?
That would be hard to say because we traveled a lot, and this book being one of a sequel, I'll be telling about it in my second book that is in the process of being written now. But I was a travel consultant, became a travel coordinator, and went on trips with my groups. So we traveled a lot. We did mostly United States, but we did go to Spain, Portugal, France, overseas. And I imagine the trip to Spain was my most interesting trip, I would say. That was not in the United States. I had many here, Alaska being one of them. I took many groups to Alaska. And but Spain, I started to say, we had side trips. And one of the side trips was to a very interesting country, kind of scary at times, but it was Morocco. But I learned how good the food was in Morocco. I loved their food. And but there just was such interesting things. Mexico is another interesting, very adverse country, actually, but a very interesting country.
Yeah. I love that you start off too, and if you go to Amazon and you look up Rachel G. Carrington, and as we've been talking about, the book is The Early Years, a Memoir. First of all, you have tons of people who have rated your book. They love your book. And you say, in the beginning, it says, author Rachel G. Carrington lays no claim to lofty jobs, higher education, nor grand accomplishments, except for a love-filled, multifaceted, family-oriented, poverty to plenty life. I love that phrase, poverty to plenty, because that's exactly what you're telling us, that it's possible.
That sums it up.
Yeah, that it might take a long time, but you can get there.
You can get there if you have the strong desire and aren't afraid of hard work and push for your goal. You can make it.
Well, I think you're very inspirational, and this book was a pleasure to read, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for asking me, Kate. I enjoyed talking with you.